Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today's episode I'm going to be speaking a bit about my initial diagnosis, my initial investigation into multiple sclerosis, some of the tests that I went through and what that was like for me and the process. So the first thing that happened that triggered the investigation, back in 2019 I was working a night shift in construction, so I was out on site and it was really cold, very early 2019, and I ended up with this horrible cold. So I came home on the Saturday, early morning, went to my bed and thought I would maybe sleep it off a little bit, and then when I got up a few hours later, I started to notice that there was a little bit of a blur at the bottom of my peripheral vision. It was a bit like a mark in my vision, or like a water drop or something. I thought it was a bit annoying, but I thought it would just go away and sleep it off through the weekend. As the weekend went on, it started getting worse until the Monday morning. The Monday morning, I couldn't actually see out of my right eye. I just couldn't see anything at all out of it. So obviously I couldn't go to work that day. My girlfriend took me to the opticians. They done a load of tests, obviously with the letters, and they done a scan of my eye, and they weren't entirely sure what it was themselves, so they referred me to the hospital. I went to the hospital a couple of hours later, went through more tests and more scans of my eyes and things like that, and they came to the conclusion it was optic neuritis, where the optic nerve at the back of your eye kind of swells up. They said with the fact that I've got a horrible cold at the moment, it's probably just down to that, because it can be triggered in anyone through the cold virus. But they said just as a precaution they want to send me for a brain scan, because it can be linked to multiple sclerosis. But they said it's very unlikely that that's what it is. So I wasn't too worried about it. I went for the MRI a little while later, and I think it was just a few weeks later at that point. And then a bit of time after that, I heard back. I got a letter from the neurologist asking me to go in to discuss my results from the brain scan for the MRI, and he said that he'd found some faint lesions on my brain, which is obviously like damage on the brain, scarring tissue. It didn't really compute with me like what was going on or anything. I just kind of accepted it and then kind of thought about it at a later date, I suppose. But he then said he would refer me in for another scan in a year's time to see how it was, and following that probably do a lumbar puncture where they take some spinal fluid from you and they do tests on that to see if there's any positive markers for multiple sclerosis. So I didn't really think too much more about it really. I just tried to kind of put it to the back of my mind. But then a year later I got my second MRI appointment come through in early 2020. So I went for that, and then then everything went into lockdown shortly after that. So I wasn't expecting anything to come through for my lumbar puncture for quite a while. I thought it'd probably be end of 2020 at least before I heard anything about it. But I was put on furlough at the time, and I was maybe on furlough for about a month, and then I got a letter through to go for my lumbar puncture, which I was quite surprised at, and I was quite relieved, to be honest. I didn't really want to wait all that time just for another test, to go in the following week to get my lumbar puncture, which, like I say, I was quite happy about, to be honest. Obviously, going to the hospital at that point, everything had changed from when I went to the hospital a couple of months previous to this for my MRI. And yeah, there was not many people in the hospital. I wasn't allowed to have anyone in with me to wait with me. My girlfriend had to go away and then come back and pick me up afterwards. Everyone had to wear masks, and it was all very locked down, obviously. So I was waiting a little while in the waiting room for the person in front of me to get their lumbar puncture done. So a little while later, once they were done, they called me in, and the nurse asked me to sit up on the bed, and she talked me through everything that they were going to do, like what it entailed getting the lumbar puncture done and what kind of tests they were going to run on it. So once all that was done and we were good to go, she asked me to roll over on my side in the fetal position with my knees up at my chest, and she put the anaesthetic into my bag, which obviously I felt the needle going in for that. She administered however much and gave it a little amount to kick in. Said, I'll feel the needle again. She says she'll keep doing this until I no longer feel the needle. So they just kept numbing it, basically, repeating the process every few minutes until I could no longer feel anything that was going on in my back. Lily. And once I was numb, obviously they put the needle into my back to take the spinal fluids out, and it didn't take very long. It was maybe about 20 minutes in total. Sent me back out to the waiting area. I had to wait in the waiting area for an hour just to make sure that I didn't have any problems, but obviously the two nurses had to kind of carry me to the waiting area because I was numb from like my lower back down. And everything was okay, and then my girlfriend came, picked me up, and we were maybe about halfway home. I started getting quite a sore head, so I just went to my bed for a little bit to try and sleep it off. And by the next morning, every time I stood up, I was in so much pain. My head was really sore, so I knew I had to phone the doctors about that, which I did, and they gave me naproxen, which is like a strong anti-inflammatory, and cocodamol for the pain. And I basically, for the majority of the next 2 weeks, I just had to lie flat on my back in my bed, unable to do very much. And then eventually it just got better throughout the course of the 2 weeks, and then I was okay again. I wouldn't want that to put anyone off getting a lumbar puncture done, because it's honestly, it's so worth getting it done, because it gives you a good idea, and the doctors as well. So anyway, I got through that, and then I went back to my work. They called me back to work shortly after that, and I was working away from home down in London, and I got a letter through, and my girlfriend sent me the picture of the letter to let me know that my lumbar puncture results had come back, tested positive for markers for multiple sclerosis. My 2 MRIs were compared from the previous year and the one that I'd done just before my lumbar puncture, and there was no significant change to the lesions, which I was relieved about. But they did also find on my second scan, they noticed a tumour in a saliva gland, which was just about here on my jawline. So they wanted me in to speak about that, which was a bit of a shock to me, really. I hadn't even noticed a lump until they'd mentioned it, but once they'd mentioned it, it was quite obvious to me. And then a bit of time passed and I got that removed in December last year, in 2021. So, but honestly, that wasn't even much of an issue to me. I was still more concerned about the multiple sclerosis than I was about the tumour before they'd made any decisions about what to do with the tumour. I'd been in for tests on it, where they put like kind of needles into it and then they take samples and send it away for testing. Came back that it was a benign tumour, so it wasn't cancerous, but they said it's something that could become cancerous later on in the process. And I decided to go ahead with the surgery and get it removed. They said, well, I'm a bit younger, I'm as well having it done now rather than wait until I get old and it causes me problems and then I struggle more to recover with the surgery. But anyway, that was that. It's never really been that much of a concern to me. Even the day that I went in for the operation, I was still more worried about my MS and what it was going to do. And that was pretty much it. The doctor had decided my MS wasn't very active because obviously over the course of a year there was no difference, no significant change to the lesions. So he didn't want to diagnose me right away, and because obviously diagnosis and then treatments and things, and they didn't want me to go through any of the side effects you can get off treatments when my MS wasn't active and I wasn't really having many problems other than that issue with the optic neuritis. And I totally agree, I totally understand that, and I was happy enough with that. I thought, okay, this is maybe not going to affect me for years here, so I can get on with my life again and put it out of my mind. Obviously that didn't happen, because here I am now in 2022 with a diagnosis and getting treatments and things. And that was pretty much it for my initial sort of journey into the MS world. Obviously, eventually I tried looking up as much as I can of people talking about multiple sclerosis, which is why I decided to do these videos, because I would like to talk about my journey with everyone else that's going through the process that I've been through. And I think that's pretty much it for this episode. If you feel like you've got something from this episode, then feel free to comment, like, subscribe. There's plenty more episodes to come. The next episode I'll be talking about my initial diagnosis, and a bit about my first flare-up that I had last year as well. So if that's something that you'd like to hear as well, then I should be posting that the next couple of days, hopefully, if everything goes to plan. Thanks very much, I appreciate you watching this, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.